The snow fell in sheets across the Polish landscape, each flake a small piece of winter's fury settling on the corrugated metal roof of the forward operating base. Inside, the air smelled of gun oil, stale coffee, and the particular tension that comes with men preparing for war. The temporary command post sat 30 kilometers from the Belarusian border, close enough to feel the weight of the old Iron Curtain, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Commander Garrett Dalton stood at the operations table, his weathered hands pressed against a satellite map that showed topography he'd memorized hours ago. At 62, his hair had gone the color of steel wool, and the lines around his eyes told stories of Panama in 89, of Desert Storm, of 2 decades watching young men become warriors or become statistics. Those eyes, pale gray like a winter sky, had seen things that would make lesser men quit. They'd also seen William Blackwell take a bullet meant for him in the chaos of Panama City 36 years ago, when both men were young enough to think they were immortal. The door swung open, bringing with it a blast of January cold and a figure that made every man in the room look up. She was small. That was the first thing Sergeant Cole Maddox thought as he glanced over from the weapons rack. 5'3", maybe 5'4" in boots. The parka made her look even smaller, a splash of military green against the gray afternoon light. When she pulled back her hood, auburn hair tumbled out, cut regulation short but still unmistakably feminine. Her face was young, mid-20s perhaps, with the kind of bone structure that belonged in a magazine rather than a forward combat position. Maddox elbowed Corporal Finn Callahan. "You seeing this?" Callahan, at 29, had learned to keep his mouth shut and his eyes open. He watched the new arrival sign paperwork at the duty desk, her movements precise, controlled. Something about the way she held herself didn't match the recruitment poster looks. "Transfer papers for Lieutenant Kira Blackwell," the duty officer announced loud enough for the room to hear. "Assignment to Special Operations Task Force 7, effective immediately." Dalton's head came up slowly. The name hit him like a punch to the solar plexus, 36 years of memory flooding back in an instant. Blackwell. The same name as the man who'd saved his life, who'd taught him what it meant to be a SEAL before the term became something civilians threw around at cocktail parties. But William Blackwell had been laid to rest 3 years ago. Another flag-draped coffin, another hero the country would forget by next news cycle. The lieutenant approached the operations table. Up close, Dalton could see her eyes were green, the color of sea glass, and they held a steadiness that made her look older than her years. "Commander Dalton," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry authority. "Lieutenant Kira Blackwell reporting for duty." The room had gone silent. In that silence, Dalton heard ghosts. Blackwell. The name felt strange on his tongue, like tasting something from a dream. "Any relation to—" "Master Chief William Blackwell was my father, sir." The words dropped into the quiet like stones into still water. Dalton felt something twist in his chest, old guilt mixed with older grief. William Blackwell's daughter. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been a kid at a funeral holding a folded flag like it could bring her father back. "I see." Dalton's voice came out rougher than he intended. "Welcome to Phoebe Frost, Lieutenant. We run a tight operation here. I trust your administrative skills are up to par." He saw it then, just a flicker across her face. Not anger, not disappointment. Something colder. Calculation. "Yes, sir. Whatever you need, sir." Maddox couldn't contain himself. "Hey, LT, you ever fired a weapon before, or are we starting from scratch?" The question came with a grin that didn't reach his eyes, the kind of smile that said volumes about what he thought of diversity initiatives and political correctness infecting the military. Kira turned to look at him. The movement was fluid, controlled, and for just a second Maddox felt like he was being assessed by something predatory. "I've fired a few, Sergeant." "Good, good." Dalton's voice had taken on the tone of a man delegating tasks he considered beneath him. "Because your first assignment is going to be maintenance. We've got 20 M4A1s that need detail cleaning, 6 M249 saws with carbon buildup, and 3 Barrett M82A1s that have been sitting in storage. I want them combat ready by 0600 tomorrow." He let the weight of that sink in. 48 hours of work compressed into 14 hours. For someone unfamiliar with the weapons, it would be impossible. For someone who'd never done it, it would be a public failure. Understood, sir. The armory is through that door. Master Chief Garrett will show you where we keep the cleaning supplies. Dalton turned back to his maps, dismissing her. Welcome to the team, Lieutenant. As she walked toward the armory, Maddox leaned over to Callahan. $20 says she's crying in an hour. 40 says she quits by midnight. Callahan watched her disappear through the doorway, noting the way she moved, the straightness of her spine, the absence of any hesitation in her step. I'll take that bet. The armory smelled of metal and preservative oil, a scent Kira had known since childhood. The weapons hung in their racks like sleeping predators, each one a tool she knew intimately. She ran her fingers along a Barrett M82A1 50 caliber 10 rounds of semi-automatic power, capable of punching through engine blocks at 1,000 yards. Her father had taught her to shoot one when she was 16 in the desert outside of 29 Palms, the recoil bruising her shoulder for a week. Master Chief Hudson Garrett found her there 10 minutes later. At 66, he moved with the careful precision of a man whose knees remembered too many hard landings and whose back carried the memory of too much gear over too many miles. His face was creased leather, his eyes the faded blue of old denim. He stopped in the doorway, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "Little warrior," he said finally, and his voice cracked on the words. Kira turned, and Hudson saw William Blackwell's daughter grown into something her father would have recognized. Not the child at the funeral, but the woman he'd hoped she'd become. Uncle Hudson. She closed the distance between them, and when he hugged her, he felt how small she was, how deceptively fragile. But he also felt the coiled strength in her frame, the muscle earned through pain and repetition. "Your father told me you made it through buds," Hudson said when they separated. "Class 358 Hell Week in November. Said you never quit, not even when they had you in the surf zone for 6 hours straight." "He taught me well." "He did." Hudson glanced back toward the command post. "Does Dalton know that I'm a SEAL? No. My records are classified. DevGru operations, mostly Syria and Iraq, some Afghanistan before the withdrawal. They transferred me here under administrative cover." Hudson's eyes narrowed. "Why? Because someone needs to know the truth about August 2021, Uncle Hudson, about what really happened in Kabul." The weight of those words settled between them. Hudson had been at William Blackwell's funeral, had helped carry the casket, had heard the official report about tactical errors and bad intelligence. He'd also heard William's voice on a scratchy satellite phone call 2 days before that final mission, words that had haunted him for 3 years. "Someone sold us out, HUD. I don't know who yet, but someone on our side is dirty." "Your father suspected," Hudson said carefully. "My father knew, and it got him killed." Before Hudson could respond, the armory door opened again. Dalton stepped through, followed by Maddox and Callahan. Behind them, 2 more team members filed in. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, 34, with the build of a college linebacker, and Staff Sergeant Devin Stone, 41, whose scarred knuckles and cauliflower ear spoke to a youth spent in boxing rings before he found the military. "Master Chief, I need you at the briefing." Dalton's tone was all business. "Lieutenant Blackwell has her assignment. Let's leave her to it." Hudson caught Kira's eye, a question and a warning in his gaze. She gave him the slightest nod. Not yet, not until the time was right. The men filed out, leaving Kira alone with 3 tons of weapons and 14 hours to prove something she shouldn't have needed to prove. She started with the Barrett M82A1s because they were the most complex and because she wanted to be fresh for the detail work. The first rifle came out of its case with the familiar weight of serious engineering, 32 pounds of precision machinery. She cleared it by muscle memory magazine out, chamber check, safety verify. Then she began the disassembly. 43 seconds later, the Barrett lay in its component parts on the cleaning mat, each piece positioned with the precision of a watchmaker's tools. Upper receiver bolt assembly barrel, lower receiver recoil spring firing pin. Her hands moved with the confidence of repetition of a skill practiced so many times it had become part of her nervous system. She was working on the second Barrett when Maddox poked his head back into the armory 45 minutes after they'd left her. He'd come to check on the progress, maybe to offer some condescending advice, possibly to catch her struggling so he could report back to the others. What he saw made him freeze. Kira had her sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her hands black with carbon and oil. 3 M4A1s lay completely disassembled on separate mats, their components gleaming from recent cleaning. The first Barrett was already reassembled and sitting in its case. She was working on the bolt assembly of the second, her movements quick and sure. But it wasn't her efficiency that made Maddox stare. It was her left forearm. The tattoo started just above her wrist and curved around her arm like a brand. The eagle anchor and trident of the Navy SEAL insignia rendered in black ink with the kind of detail that spoke to expensive work and serious commitment. Below it, smaller but unmistakable 4 letters. DevGru. SEAL Team 6. The pieces clicked into place in Maddox's mind with the slow horror of understanding. DevGru didn't take administrative transfers. DevGru didn't do diversity hiring. DevGru was where you went if you were the best of the best, if you'd proven yourself beyond any shadow of doubt, if you'd earned the right to wear that insignia through blood and pain and the kind of suffering that broke most people. Holy shit, Maddox breathed. Kira looked up, noticing him for the first time. She followed his gaze to her arm, to the tattoo she'd stopped thinking about years ago. For a moment their eyes met, and Maddox felt the full weight of his earlier dismissiveness land on him like a physical blow. "You need something, Sergeant?" Her voice was neutral, professional. No ma'am. Just checking on your progress. I'll have everything ready by 0400. Tell the commander he can inspect whenever he likes." Maddox backed out of the armory, his mind racing. He found Dalton in the command post, bent over a tactical display with Hudson and Webb. "Commander." Maddox's voice came out higher than he intended. "Sir, I think you need to see something." Dalton didn't look up. "If this is about the new lieutenant, she's got the trident, sir." That got his attention. Dalton's head snapped up, his gray eyes sharp. "What?" "SEAL trident tattoo. Left arm. And below it," Maddox swallowed. "DevGru, sir." The room went still. Hudson's face betrayed nothing, but something flickered in his eyes. Webb straightened up slowly. Stone, who'd been cleaning his sidearm, froze mid-motion. "You're certain?" Dalton said. "Yes, sir. I saw it clearly." Dalton was already moving his long strides, eating up the distance to the armory. The others followed, a small parade of men about to have their assumptions shattered. They found Kira reassembling the third Barrett. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, each component sliding into place with the satisfied click of proper engineering. She sensed them before she saw them, 5 men crowding the doorway, their body language a mix of disbelief and dawning respect. She finished seating the bolt, checked the action, then set the rifle carefully in its case. Only then did she turn to face them. Dalton's eyes went to her arm, to the tattoo that changed everything. For a long moment he couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was seeing. William Blackwell's daughter, his little girl, wearing the mark that fewer than 3,000 people on Earth had earned the right to wear. "Where did you earn that trident, Lieutenant?" His voice was steady, but barely. Kira met his gaze, and in her eyes Dalton saw something he recognized. The same unwavering focus William had possessed. The same steel core wrapped in quiet competence. "Coronado, sir, Buds Class 358, graduated November 2020. And DevGru, selected 2021. Green Team training, then operational deployment, 18 months in Syria, 6 in Iraq, final rotation in Afghanistan before the withdrawal." The numbers were staggering. 18 combat deployments between 23 and 27 years old. Most SEALs didn't see that kind of action in 10 years. Dalton did the math, his military mind automatically calculating. She would have been in Kabul during the evacuation, during the chaos. During August 2021, he said slowly. You were there. Yes, sir. Your father. The word stuck in his throat. My father was Master Chief William Blackwell, SEAL Team 3 Force Recon Attachment, 33 years of service. He died August 15, 2021 in a classified operation outside Kabul. Her voice didn't waver, but Dalton heard the edge beneath the words, sharp as a knife. The official report said tactical error, command failure, bad intelligence. I read that report, Dalton said quietly. Then you read a lie, sir. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Hudson shifted his weight, his expression carefully neutral. Webb and Stone exchanged glances. Maddox looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. That's a serious allegation, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, it is. Kira rolled down her sleeves, covering the tattoo, covering the scars that Dalton now realized marked her skin. My father was many things, Commander Dalton, but careless wasn't one of them. Neither was stupid. Someone sold his team out. Someone on our side fed intelligence to the enemy. 4 SEALs died in that ambush. My father was one of them. She moved to the cleaning station, her hands methodical as she wiped down tools that were already clean. The repetitive motion seemed to center her, to keep something carefully controlled from breaking free. Before he died, my father sent me a message. 3 words on a scratchy sat phone connection. She looked up, meeting Dalton's eyes. He said, "Find the truth." The command post felt smaller now, the walls pressing in with the weight of revelation. Dalton thought about Panama, about the chaos of Just Cause, about William Blackwell throwing him behind cover and taking rounds meant for a young officer who'd been too slow to read the ambush. He thought about the debt he'd carried for 36 years, the guilt of surviving when better men died. And you think the truth is here? Dalton's voice was rough. In Poland. I think the truth is wherever weapons deals and intelligence leaks intersect, sir. And right now that intersection runs through this operation. Kira finished with the tools and turned to face him fully. The tactical nuclear device you're trying to intercept, the intelligence on its location, the timeline of the deal. Does any of it feel familiar to you, Commander? Does any of it feel just a little too clean? Dalton's jaw tightened. The honest answer was yes. The intelligence on this operation had come through channels that made him uncomfortable, from sources that seemed too willing to share. The entire setup felt orchestrated, like pieces moving on a board he couldn't quite see. You're suggesting this is a trap, Webb said from the doorway. I'm suggesting someone wants us here, Kira corrected. Whether that makes it a trap depends on what they want. Stone spoke up, his voice gravelly from years of smoking before the Navy made him quit. And what do you want, Lieutenant? Why are you really here? Kira was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant, focused on something the rest of them couldn't see. When she spoke, her voice was soft but absolutely certain. I'm here to finish what my father started. I'm here to find the person who sold him out and make sure they never do it again. And I'm here to prove that Master Chief William Blackwell died doing his duty, not making mistakes. She looked at each of them in turn. That's what I want, Staff Sergeant. Justice, truth, and maybe a little bit of revenge. The honesty was startling. Most people wrapped their motives in noble causes and patriotic language. Kira Blackwell laid hers out like cards on a table, daring them to object. Dalton made a decision, the same kind of split-second call he'd made 1,000 times in combat. Trust or don't. Accept or reject. Live or die based on judgment and instinct. Hudson, get her a full-gear loadout. Webb, Stone, integrate her into the tactical brief. Maddox Callahan. I want a full breakdown of approach vectors by 2200. He turned back to Kira. You're right that this operation feels wrong. You're right that the intelligence is too clean. So we're going to plan for the mission we've been assigned, but we're also going to plan for the one we might actually face. Yes, sir. And Lieutenant, Dalton's voice softened fractionally. Your father saved my life in Panama. I've carried that debt for 36 years. I can't repay him, but maybe I can help his daughter. Whatever truth you're chasing, whatever justice you need, I'm with you. Something flickered across Kira's face, emotion carefully controlled but present. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. You might not like what we find." The briefing room filled up over the next hour as the team assembled for the tactical breakdown. Someone had made coffee, the kind of overbrewed military sludge that could strip paint, and someone else had produced a box of protein bars that tasted like sweetened cardboard. These were the rituals of soldiers preparing for violence, the small comforts before the storm. Dalton spread the satellite imagery across the table, high-resolution photographs that showed their target in stark detail. An abandoned warehouse complex 45 kilometers east, close enough to the Belarusian border to make everyone nervous. 3 buildings, Soviet-era construction, concrete and steel that had weathered 40 years of neglect. "Intelligence says the exchange happens in 60 hours. Dalton began, his finger tracing the perimeter. "Tactical nuclear device probably stripped from a Russian stockpile in the 90s, small enough to fit in a briefcase but powerful enough to level 6 city blocks. The buyer is unknown, but the seller is former KGB connected to organized crime in Minsk." Webb leaned over the photos. "Security. Estimated 15 to 20 contractors. Mixed nationality, probably former military. Light armor, mostly small arms, maybe 1 or 2 vehicle-mounted weapons. Approach. That's what we're here to discuss." Dalton looked around the table. "Standard OP calls for overwatch position here." He tapped a low rise 800 meters from the target. "With entry teams approaching from north and south. But I want alternatives, I want contingencies, and I want a plan for this being something other than what we've been told." Kira had been studying the imagery in silence, her green eyes moving across the photographs with the intensity of someone reading a language the others couldn't see. Finally, she spoke. "The perimeter is wrong." Everyone looked at her. "Explain," Dalton said. She pulled one of the photos closer, pointing to details the others had glossed over. "See these positions? They're set up for external threat, watching the roads, covering the approaches. But there's minimal internal security. No overlapping fields of fire, no fallback positions. It's like they're more worried about someone coming in than something going wrong inside." "So they're confident," Maddox offered. "Or they're expecting different guests." Kira's finger moved to another part of the image. "And here, this vehicle, it's positioned for rapid egress, not security. Someone in that building is ready to leave in a hurry." Hudson had been quiet, but now he leaned forward, his old eyes sharp. "You think it's a meeting, not just a handoff?" "I think someone important is going to be there. Someone who doesn't want to be identified." Kira straightened up. "If I wanted to set up a trap for a special operations team, this is exactly how I'd do it. Make the target juicy enough to draw them in, make the security look manageable but not suspiciously light, then have overwhelming force ready to respond once they're committed." The room went quiet as the implications sank in. Stone broke the silence. "You're saying we're the real target?" "I'm saying we might be, or we might be a convenient bonus. Either way, we need to plan for it." Dalton studied her, seeing not William Blackwell's daughter, but a trained operator, someone who'd survived 18 combat deployments by being smart and cautious and ruthlessly realistic. The kind of soldier he wanted on his team. "All right," he said. "We plan for both scenarios. Hudson, I want you and Blackwell to develop an alternative approach vector, something that doesn't follow the expected path. Webb, Stone, work on rapid extraction scenarios. Maddox, Callahan, you're on communications and equipment. If this goes bad, I want multiple ways to call for support and multiple ways to disappear." The team dispersed to their assignments, the command post filling with the focused energy of professionals doing what they did best. Kira found herself at a secondary table with Hudson spreading out topographical maps that showed terrain the satellites couldn't quite capture. "You handled that well," Hudson said quietly, his voice pitched low enough that only she could hear. "I handled it honestly. Whether that's well remains to be seen." "Your father would be proud." Kira's hand stilled on the map. "My father would be alive if someone hadn't sold him out. That's what matters now. Revenge won't bring him back, little warrior." No. She looked up, meeting his eyes, and Hudson saw the steel beneath the grief. But justice might help me sleep at night, and making sure it never happens again, that's worth whatever it costs. Hudson reached across the table, his weathered hand covering hers. Just remember what your father taught you. Stay smart. Stay controlled. Anger makes you sloppy. I remember Uncle Hudson. I remember everything he taught me. They worked through the night, the team coming together in the way that good units do, finding rhythm and trust despite the chaos. By 0300, they had 3 different operational plans, 2 backup extraction routes, and enough contingencies to make even the pessimists feel cautiously prepared. Kira had finished with the weapons hours ago, every rifle cleaned and function checked, every component gleaming and ready. She'd worked through it mechanically, the familiar task giving her hands something to do while her mind processed the larger problem. Somewhere out there within reach but still hidden was the person who'd killed her father. The person who'd sold out American operators for money or ideology or whatever corrupted currency traders dealt in. She stepped outside at 0400, needing air, needing space from the close confines of the command post. The snow had stopped, leaving the world crystalline and clean under a sky full of stars. Her breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a small ghost that dissipated into darkness. Can't sleep. She turned to find Dalton standing a few meters away, a cup of coffee steaming in his hands. He'd ditched his jacket, apparently immune to the cold or too tired to care. Sleep's overrated, sir. So's rank when it's just the two of us. Call me Garrett. Kira nodded, accepting the informality. In the field, especially on small teams, the lines of hierarchy blurred into something more pragmatic. Your father and I went through SEAL training together, Garrett said, his voice quiet. Back when it was still UDTR before Buds. We were kids, 19 and 20, thought we were the toughest things alive. Hell Week broke that illusion pretty quick. He told me about Hell Week. Said the only way through was one evolution at a time. That's what he told everyone. It's how he got through, how he helped the rest of us get through. Garrett sipped his coffee. Panama was my first real combat. I was an LT, green as grass, thought I knew everything. William was a chief by then, old hand at 28. We hit some resistance near Torrijos Airport and I froze. Just for a second, but in combat a second is forever. William threw me behind cover and took the rounds that should have killed me. Kira had heard the story before, but not from Garrett's perspective. Her father had mentioned Panama had the scars to prove it, but he'd always brushed past the details like they were nothing worth discussing. He took 3 rounds, Garrett continued. 1 in the vest, 1 through the shoulder, 1 grazed his head. Should have killed him, would have killed most people. He just got mad, returned fire, held that position until reinforcements arrived. Then he looked at me and said, "Next time, don't think. Just move." Sounds like him. Best advice I ever got. Garrett turned to look at her, his gray eyes searching. I've been doing this for 40 years, Kira. I've seen a lot of operators, a lot of warriors. Your father was special. Not because he was the strongest or the fastest. There were always guys who could outlift him or outrun him. He was special because he understood what this job really costs and did it anyway. He understood the price and paid it willingly. Until someone took the choice away from him. Yeah, Garrett's voice went hard. Until that. They stood in silence for a while, 2 soldiers in the darkness, breathing clouds of vapor into the Polish night. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called the sound lonely and clear. Tomorrow we move on that warehouse, Garrett said finally. Whatever we find there, whatever truth you're chasing, I need you focused. I need you sharp. Can you do that? Kira thought about her father, about the last time she'd seen him alive at a family barbecue, grilling steaks and arguing about baseball. She thought about the flag they'd handed her at the funeral, folded into a perfect triangle as if geometry could contain grief. She thought about the message he'd left her, 3 words that had driven her for 3 years. Find the truth. I can do that, Garrett. I can be whatever you need me to be. Good. He finished his coffee, crushed the cup, and tossed it toward a waste bin 15 feet away. It landed perfectly, nothing but net. Get some rest. We roll out at 1800. He walked away, leaving Kira alone with the stars and the cold and the weight of what was coming. She stood there a while longer, letting the cold seep through her clothes, letting it sharpen her focus. Somewhere out there, answers waited. Somewhere out there, justice had an appointment to keep. Tomorrow the truth would start to reveal itself. Tomorrow the man who killed her father would face justice. Tomorrow Master Chief William Blackwell's daughter would finish what he started. She turned and walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. The convoy rolled out at 1800. Exactly 2 Humvees painted the dull gray of winter camouflage, their engines rumbling through the Polish countryside like distant thunder. Kira sat in the second vehicle between Maddox and Callahan. Her gear checked and rechecked until every buckle and strap had become part of her body. The Barrett M82A1 rode beside her, wrapped in a drag bag, 50 caliber rounds, loaded with the kind of precision that could split a man's head at 1,000 yards. Outside, the landscape slid past in shades of white and gray. Snow-covered fields stretched to horizons broken only by skeletal trees and the occasional farmhouse lights already burning against the early winter darkness. They were 45 kilometers from the target, maybe an hour if the road stayed clear, maybe longer if the weather turned. Dalton rode in the lead vehicle with Hudson and Webb, maintaining radio silence, navigating by GPS and memorized landmarks. The plan was simple in concept, complicated in execution. Get within 2 kilometers of the target, establish overwatch, wait for the exchange to begin, then move in fast and surgical. Extract the nuclear device, capture or eliminate the principals, disappear before anyone could respond. Simple. Except nothing about this felt simple. Kira watched the terrain through her window, her mind cataloging distances and angles, cover and concealment, the 1,000 small details that separated good operators from dead ones. Beside her, Maddox sat with his M4A1 between his knees, eyes half closed but not sleeping. Combat veterans learned to rest anywhere, anytime, storing up energy for when the shooting started. "You ever worked Poland before?" he asked, his voice low enough not to disturb Callahan, who actually was sleeping. "Negative. Mostly Middle East. Some Africa. Different kind of cold here. Gets in your bones, makes everything harder. Shooting, moving, thinking." Kira nodded. She'd trained in cold weather environments, done winter warfare courses in Alaska and Norway. But Maddox was right. Cold was cold until you had to fight in it. Then it became an enemy all its own. "Your old man," Maddox said carefully. "He was the real deal. Heard stories about him even when I was going through training. The Phantom, they called him. Said he could ghost through enemy lines like smoke. He was good at his job. Better than good from what I heard. Legendary." Maddox shifted his weight, the Humvee bouncing over a rough patch of road. "Must be hard living up to that." Kira turned to look at him, seeing in his eyes something other than the dismissive attitude from before. Not quite respect yet, but at least acknowledgement. Recognition that she'd earned her place through the same hell that had forged him. "I'm not trying to live up to anything," she said quietly. "I'm trying to finish what he started. There's a difference." Before Maddox could respond, Dalton's voice crackled through their earpieces. "All stations hold position. We've got movement ahead." The convoy slowed, then stopped. Through the windshield, Kira could see the lead Humvee maybe 30 meters forward, its brake lights glowing red in the gathering darkness. Stone, who was driving their vehicle, killed the engine, and suddenly the world was very quiet. Kira slipped out of the Humvee with her weapon ready, moving to the roadside where Dalton and Hudson stood studying something through night vision binoculars. When she got close enough, Dalton handed them to her without a word. She pressed the optics to her eyes and the world transformed into shades of green. A kilometer ahead, where the road curved through a small forest, vehicles blocked the passage. 3 of them arranged in a staggered pattern that said checkpoint or ambush. Figures moved between them, maybe 6 or 7 too far to identify, but close enough to be a problem. "Local police," Webb suggested, coming up beside them. "Wrong vehicles. Those are civilian SUVs, high-end, the kind organized crime uses." Hudson's voice carried the certainty of experience. Could be smugglers, could be worse. Kira studied the scene, her tactical mind processing options. The road was the only clear route to their target. Going around meant rough terrain delays they couldn't afford and the risk of losing the element of surprise. Going through meant engagement, potential casualties, definitely exposure. They're not random, she said, lowering the binoculars. Look at the spacing. They're watching for something specific, waiting for someone. Dalton took the binoculars back, looked again, and cursed softly. You're right. This is a screening position. Someone knew we were coming. The implication hung in the cold air like a held breath. Someone knew. Someone had leaked their route, their timeline, their operation, just like Afghanistan, just like the ambush that had killed her father. We need to abort, Stone said, his scarred knuckles white on his rifle. Fall back, regroup, come at this from a different angle. We've got 58 hours before the exchange, Webb countered. We abort now, we might not get another shot. Dalton stood silent, his weathered face unreadable in the dim light. Kira could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the algebra of risk versus reward, mission versus men. It was the same math her father had done 1,000 times, the same impossible equation that had no perfect answer. There's another route, Kira said. Older road, Soviet era, runs parallel about 2 kilometers north. It's not on most maps, probably rough, but it should bypass this position entirely. Everyone turned to look at her. How do you know about it? Dalton asked. Because I spent the last 3 days studying every map, every satellite image, every piece of terrain intelligence I could find. If someone's trying to hurt us, I wanted to know where the fences were. Hudson made a sound that might have been approval. Dalton studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Show me. They gathered around the hood of the Humvee, Kira spreading out a topographical map that looked like it had survived several wars. Her finger traced a thin line that curved through terrain marked with elevation contours and old Soviet grid coordinates. Here, it parallels our current route but stays in the high ground. Harder going, especially in snow, but it should put us within striking distance without going through that checkpoint. Should, Maddox repeated, but you don't know for sure. I know it exists. I know it runs where we need to go. The rest is risk management. Dalton made his decision with the same swift certainty that had kept him alive for 4 decades. We take the Soviet road. Hudson, you're on point in the lead vehicle. Blackwell, you're with me. Everyone else tight formation, weapons hot. And if anyone so much as sneezes wrong, we go loud and fast. Questions. There were none. They'd all made peace with uncertainty long ago. The Soviet road was everything Kira had warned and worse. Broken pavement gave way to gravel, gave way to packed dirt, turned to frozen mud. The Humvees crawled along at 15 kilometers per hour, their suspensions groaning, headlights off, navigating by moonlight and night vision. Trees pressed close on both sides, skeletal branches scraping against metal like fingernails on a coffin. Kira rode in the lead vehicle, now pressed between Dalton and Hudson, her eyes scanning the darkness for threats that could materialize from nothing. The Barrett rode across her lap, too long for the confined space, but too valuable to leave behind. This was the weapon that could reach out and touch someone at distances that made rifles into artillery. Your father and I came through here once, Hudson said, his voice barely audible over the engine. Not this exact spot, but close. Back in '91, right after the Soviet Union collapsed. Everything was chaos weapons, disappearing nukes unaccounted for. We were part of a team securing sites, making sure nothing fell into the wrong hands. Did you succeed? Kira asked. Mostly. There were always rumors, whispers of things that slipped through the cracks. A tactical device here, some uranium there, the kind of stuff that keeps intelligence analysts awake at night. He paused. Your father hated it. Hated knowing that somewhere out there someone had the means to kill thousands and we couldn't stop it. Is that why you think this operation is real, because the device actually exists? I think the device exists. I'm less sure about everything else. They drove in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts, their own preparations for what was coming. Kira thought about her father's last message, 3 words that had driven her across continents and through 3 years of investigation. Find the truth. Simple words, impossible task. But she was close now. She could feel it. The radio crackled. Stone's voice from the second Humvee. Lead vehicle, we've got a tail. Single vehicle lights off, maintaining distance of about 500 meters. Everyone in the lead Humvee tensed. Dalton picked up the handset. Confirmed visual. Confirmed SUV, same type as the checkpoint. Could be coincidence. Could be, Dalton said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it any more than Stone did. He looked at Hudson. Options. Keep moving. See if they follow all the way to the target. Or stop now, deal with them, risk exposure. Kira was watching through the side mirror, catching glimpses of the trailing vehicle when moonlight hit it just right. They're not trying to hide. If they wanted to stay covert, they'd drop back further, kill their engine, occasionally use terrain masking. This is deliberate. They want us to know they're there. To what end? Webb asked from the back seat. To push us forward, to keep us moving toward the target even though we know something's wrong. She turned to Dalton. It's herding behavior. They're not trying to stop us. They're making sure we don't turn back. Dalton's jaw clenched. Every instinct he'd developed over 40 years was screaming at him to abort, to extract, to live, to fight another day. But the nuclear device was real. The threat was real, and if they walked away, it would disappear into the black market and resurface somewhere as a mushroom cloud over a city full of civilians who would never know how close they'd come to being saved. We proceed, he said finally, but weapons free. Anyone makes a move, we engage without hesitation. And Blackwell, if this goes bad, you make sure that device doesn't leave the area, whatever it takes. Yes, sir. The last 10 kilometers took an hour. The Soviet road deteriorated into something that barely qualified as a trail, forcing them to dismount and walk the final 2 kilometers. They cached the Humvees in a ravine camouflaged with cut branches and snow, then moved out on foot in a tactical column. Hudson on point, followed by Dalton and Kira, then the others spread at 5-meter intervals. The warehouse complex appeared through the trees like something from a Cold War nightmare. 3 buildings arranged in a rough triangle, concrete walls stained by decades of weather, windows either broken or bricked over the whole site, surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence that had collapsed in places. Moonlight painted it silver and black, all harsh shadows and exposed angles. Kira dropped prone at the tree line 650 meters from the nearest building and pulled the Barrett into position. Through the scope, the world became a narrow tunnel of magnified reality. She could see the vehicles Hudson had mentioned, 4 of them now instead of 2. Could see figures moving between buildings, at least 15, maybe more. Could see lights in what looked like the central structure, suggesting power, suggesting active occupation. I count 17 tangos, she whispered into her throat mic. 4 vehicles, looks like 2 are armored. Foot patrol pattern suggests they're expecting trouble, but not from this direction. Most of their attention is on the road approach. Dalton settled beside her with his own optics. Confirm the count. I see the same. Hudson Callahan, your Alpha team. North approach entry through that collapsed section of fence. Webstone, your Bravo team. South side through the maintenance gate. Maddox, your Overwatch with Blackwell. Engage only on my mark or if compromise is imminent. The teams acknowledged in whispers, then melted into the darkness like ghosts. Kira tracked their movement through her scope, watching Hudson and Callahan flow through the terrain with the smooth confidence of men who'd done this hundreds of times. Webb and Stone were almost as good, younger but still professional, their weapons tracking potential threats as they moved. Your father taught you to shoot? Maddox asked, settling into position beside her with his own rifle, an M110 semi-automatic sniper system. Taught me everything. Started when I was 8 with a .22, worked my way up. By 16, I was shooting the Barrett. She adjusted her scope, compensating for wind elevation, the rotation of the Earth at this latitude. He said shooting was like meditation. Everything else falls away until it's just you and the target and the space between. Zen and the art of putting holes in things. Something like that. They fell silent watching their teams advance. Hudson and Callahan reached the fence, slipped through, disappeared into the shadows of the northern building. Webb and Stone were 30 seconds behind. Moving toward the southern approach, everything was going according to plan, which was exactly when plans usually fell apart. Kira's scope swept across the compound in a methodical pattern, checking sectors, looking for the detail that didn't fit. She found it on her third sweep. A man standing on the roof of the central building, barely visible, holding what looked like a radio. Not a guard. Guards watched outward. This man was watching the other guards, coordinating, controlling. "I've got a controller," she whispered. "Central building, rooftop, northeast corner. Male, approximately 40 years old, civilian clothes, armed with a sidearm and radio." "Can you take him?" Dalton asked. 650 meters, light wind maybe 3 knots from the east, temperature 18 degrees Fahrenheit. The Barrett could make the shot in her sleep, but taking it would announce their presence, would turn this from a covert operation into a gunfight. "Yes, but it'll alert everyone. Hold position. Let's see what Alpha and Bravo find." Hudson's voice came through, barely audible. "Alpha team in position. I've got eyes on the interior through a broken window. Multiple hostiles, looks like 12 to 15. Christ, Dalton, they're waiting for something. This isn't a handoff, this is a reception." Before Dalton could respond, Webb broke in. "Bravo team has the south side. I've got visual on what looks like the package. Metal case, right size for a tactical device. But Dalton, something's wrong. There are too many people for a simple exchange. This is bigger than intelligence suggested." Kira's scope found the man on the roof again. He was talking into his radio now, animated, clearly receiving information. Then he turned, and even at 600 meters through a night vision scope, Kira saw his face clearly. Her blood turned to ice. She knew that face, had seen it in briefings in classified files, in the nightmares that still woke her at 3 in the morning. Lieutenant Commander Wyatt Thorne, her father's protege. The man William Blackwell had mentored for 4 years, had trusted like a son, had believed in absolutely. The man who had disappeared 7 months after her father's death, his military records sealed his whereabouts unknown. "Dalton," her voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. "The controller. I know him. Lieutenant Commander Wyatt Thorne, Navy SEAL, formerly attached to DevGru. He went missing after Afghanistan. He's been classified as AWOL for 2 years. The silence on the radio was absolute. Then Dalton, his voice tight. "You're certain?" "I'd stake my life on it, Vaughn. He was my father's student. My father trained him, recommended him for DevGru, vouched for him when others had doubts." She kept her crosshairs centered on Thorne's face. "If he's here, this isn't a coincidence. This is personal." Hudson's voice cut through, urgent but controlled. "We need to abort. If Thorne is here, he knows our capabilities, our tactics. He'll have planned for everything we can throw at him." "Negative," Dalton said. Then after a pause heavy with meaning, he added quietly, "I knew something was wrong." Kira's head snapped toward him. "What?" "6 months ago," Dalton continued, his voice tight. "Thorne contacted me, tried to recruit me, offered money protection, said the wars were over and it was time to cash in. I refused, reported it through back channels, but he disappeared before anyone could act." His gray eyes found Kira's through the darkness. "I suspected he was the leak that killed your father, but I had no proof. Not until tonight." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Kira spoke, her voice like ice. "You knew, and you didn't tell me." "I suspected. There's a difference. And I brought you here because I thought Thorne would surface if the bait was right." Dalton's tone held no apology. "Your father would have done the same. My father's dead because of him. And tonight we end it, together." Dalton's voice hardened. "We're too committed to abort now. Alpha Bravo, hold position but prepare for compromise. Maddox Blackwell, if this goes loud, your priority is Thorne. He does not leave this area alive. Understood?" "Understood," Kira said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Maddox glanced at her, saw something in her face that made him pause. "You good? I'm perfect." What happened next took less than 10 seconds but felt like an eternity. The lights in the compound suddenly blazed to full brightness, spotlights mounted on the buildings activating in sequence. Hudson and Callahan were caught in the open 20 meters from cover, their positions exposed. Webb and Stone had slightly better concealment but were still clearly visible to anyone looking. Then a voice boomed across the compound, amplified by speakers, and Kira recognized it immediately. Wyatt Thorne, his tone mocking his words, carrying across the frozen night. "Welcome to Poland, Commander Dalton, Master Chief Garrett, and especially to you, Kira. I've been expecting you, all of you." The tactical situation collapsed into chaos. Hudson and Callahan went prone, scrambling for cover as gunfire erupted from multiple positions. Webb and Stone returned fire, their muzzle flashes bright in the darkness. The contractors in the compound moved with professional efficiency, coordinated fire teams engaging from prepared positions. "All teams suppress and maneuver." Dalton's voice was calm despite the chaos. "Blackwell, light them up." Kira's finger found the trigger, her breathing steady, her world reduced to the scope's view. The Barrett roared, the recoil slamming into her shoulder with familiar force. 600 meters away, a contractor dropped, his chest opened by .50 caliber destruction. She worked the bolt, acquired a new target, fired again. Another man down, this one trying to flank Hudson's position. Beside her, Maddox was engaging with methodical precision, his semi-automatic rifle barking every 2 seconds. 3 rounds, 3 hits, enemy fire diminishing from the southern sector. But there were too many of them. For every contractor they dropped, 2 more appeared. This wasn't a security detail. This was a well-trained defensive force, exactly as Kira had feared. Hudson and Callahan made it to cover, a concrete barrier that protected them from direct fire. They returned shots when they could, but they were pinned, unable to advance or retreat. Webb and Stone were in better position, but equally stuck, trading fire with enemies they couldn't quite see. Through her scope, Kira tracked Thorne as he moved along the rooftop, directing his forces with hand signals and radio commands. He was staying low, using the roof's HVAC units for cover, but he was there, visible, vulnerable if she could just get a clean shot. "I'm going to nail Thorne," she told Dalton. 60 seconds, I'll have an angle. Do it fast, we can't hold here long." She shifted position, moving 10 meters to her right to get around the obstruction blocking her view. Maddox provided covering fire, his rifle keeping heads down, while she relocated. The Barrett was heavy, 32 pounds of precisely machined steel, but she'd carried heavier loads over worse terrain. Her new position gave her the angle she needed. Thorne was visible now, exposed for maybe 3 seconds as he moved between cover points. Not much time, just enough. Kira settled into the shooting position, her body becoming one with the weapon. Breathing slowed, heart rate dropped. The world fell away until there was only the scope, the target, the mathematics of trajectory and wind and justice. Thorne stepped into the open. Kira's finger began the trigger press, smooth and steady, exactly as her father had taught her 20 years ago in the California desert. Then Thorne turned, looked directly at her position 600 meters away, and smiled. He raised his hand, held up a radio, and pressed a button. The explosion came from behind them, from the ravine where they'd hidden the Humvees. A massive detonation that lit up the night sky, the shockwave rolling over them like a physical thing. Secondary explosions followed as fuel tanks caught, as ammunition cooked off, as their extraction vehicles and all their reserve supplies turned into a fireball that could probably be seen from space. "Vehicles are gone!" Stone shouted over the radio. "We're on foot, no evac, no backup." Thorne's amplified voice came again, carrying across the compound. "Did you really think I wouldn't plan for everything, Kira? I learned from the best. Your father taught me well, especially the part about always having a backup plan." Kira's finger completed the trigger press. The Barrett fired the shot perfect, the bullet tracking exactly where she'd aimed. But Thorne had already moved, dropping behind cover the instant before the round arrived. It missed him by inches, sparking off metal where his head had been. "Damn it!" She worked the bolt, tried to reacquire, but he was gone, disappeared into the building's interior. "All teams fall back to Rally Point Omega." Dalton's voice cut through the chaos. Fighting, retreat, covering fire, move now. Hudson and Callahan broke from cover, sprinting toward the tree line while Webb and Stone provided suppression. The contractors pursued their fire, disciplined and accurate. Too accurate. These weren't random hired guns. These were professionals, possibly former military, definitely well-trained. Kira and Maddox put rounds downrange as fast as they could, acquire targets, buying seconds for their teammates to reach safety. She dropped 3 more contractors, Maddox got 2, but more kept coming. It was like fighting a hydra. Then Hudson went down. He was 50 meters from the tree line, running hard. Despite his 66 years, when a round caught him in the leg, he fell, rolled, came up trying to crawl, but another burst of fire forced him flat. Callahan turned back immediately, but Webb grabbed him. "You'll just get killed. We need support." "I'll get him," Kira said, already moving. She left the Barrett. It was too heavy for what came next. Drew her Sig Sauer P226 and started running toward Hudson's position. "Blackwell negative." Dalton's order was absolute. "That's a kill zone. You'll never make it." She ignored him. Hudson was her father's best friend. The man who'd taught her half of what she knew, who'd been at every birthday and graduation and milestone of her life. She wasn't leaving him to die in Polish mud. The distance to Hudson was 50 meters that felt like 50 miles. She ran low, weaving, using every bit of cover the terrain offered. Rounds snapped past her so close she felt their passage, but none found flesh. She reached Hudson, grabbed his tactical vest, started dragging him back toward safety. "Kira, no!" Hudson gasped, his face pale with pain and blood loss. "Leave me. Get out." "Shut up, Uncle Hudson. You don't get to die today." Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, every meter was agony. 40 meters to the tree line, 35, 30. Maddox and Webb were providing covering fire, their rifles hammering, but it wasn't enough. The contractors were closing in, maneuvering to cut off her retreat. 20 meters. A round hit her left shoulder, a sharp spike of pain that nearly dropped her. But she'd been shot before, knew how to compartmentalize it, how to keep moving despite the damage. She shifted her grip on Hudson, pulled harder. 15 meters, 10, then Dalton was there, emerging from the trees with his rifle up, firing precisely placed shots that dropped 2 contractors and made the others dive for cover. He grabbed Hudson's other arm, and together they hauled the wounded SEAL into the forest. But Maddox was still out there, still providing cover. Kira saw him stand to relocate, saw the contractor emerge from behind a vehicle, saw the muzzle flash that caught Maddox center mass. He went down hard, his rifle clattering away. "Maddox!" Callahan's scream cut through the chaos. Kira started back, but Dalton's hand caught her vest. "He's gone! We have to move!" She looked back one more time, saw Maddox trying to crawl, saw the contractors closing in. Then the world went white as someone tossed a grenade, and when her vision cleared, Maddox was still. They didn't stop running until they were a kilometer away, until the sounds of gunfire faded to distant echoes. When they finally collapsed behind a fallen tree, gasping for breath, Kira assessed the damage. Hudson's leg was bad, femoral artery possibly nicked, bleeding heavily despite the tourniquet Callahan had already applied. Her own shoulder was through and through painful, but not immediately life-threatening. "Sound off," Dalton ordered, his voice steady despite their desperate situation. "Alpha lead mobile." Hudson managed, his teeth gritted against pain. "Alpha 2 mobile." Callahan confirmed, his voice broken. "Bravo lead mobile," Webb said. "Bravo 2 mobile," Stone added. "Overwatch 2 mobile," Kira said, pressing her hand against her shoulder wound. "Wounded but operational." The silence where Maddox should have answered was deafening. Dalton looked at his team, at the blood and exhaustion and grim determination. They'd lost their vehicles, most of their equipment, and any element of surprise. They'd lost Maddox. They were 45 kilometers from friendly territory on foot, with at least 1 serious casualty and unknown numbers of hostiles hunting them. By any rational assessment, they should abort, call for extraction, get Hudson to a hospital, mourn their dead, and live to fight another day. But Kira's mind was racing with different calculations. Thorne was here. The man who'd killed her father was less than a kilometer away, and he'd known they were coming, had prepared for them, had turned their operation into an ambush. Which meant he'd been the leak, the source, the traitor who'd sold out her father's team in Afghanistan and probably a dozen other operations before and since. "He's not getting away," she said, her voice low, but carrying absolute conviction. "Thorne, he's the one. He's been the traitor all along." Dalton turned to her, his gray eyes hard. "You have proof. I have certainty. He was my father's student. My father discovered something about him, something bad enough to get him killed. Thorne's been running ever since, selling intelligence, staying one step ahead." She looked at each of them. "That nuclear device is real, but it's also bait. Thorne is using it to draw in operators he needs to eliminate. People who might know what he's done. People like us. People like Maddox." The team exchanged glances. Hudson, despite his pain, nodded slowly. "It fits. William suspected someone close, someone who knew operations before they happened. He was gathering evidence when he died. We're 45 clicks from extraction with no wheels and no backup," Stone said. "Even if you're right, we can't fight our way through that force." "We don't have to fight all of them," Kira said. "Just Thorne. We take him down, we can extract later. But if we leave now, he disappears again, and the next team that comes after him dies too, just like Maddox." Dalton was quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that spoke to the weight of command, to the burden of sending people into danger based on judgment calls that might be wrong. Finally, he looked at Hudson. "Can you move?" Hudson gritted his teeth. "With help. Won't be fast, but I can make it." "Then here's what we're going to do." Dalton pulled out his map, spreading it on the ground. "Webb, Stone, you're taking Hudson back to Rally Point Delta. There's an old logging road 3 clicks west. You get there, you call for extraction, you get the Master Chief to a hospital. No heroics, no delays, understood?" They nodded, unhappy but accepting the logic. "Callahan, Blackwell, you're with me. We're going back to that compound and we're going to kill or capture Wyatt Thorne. After that, we secure the nuclear device or destroy it. For Maddox. Questions?" "Just one," Callahan said, his voice thick with grief. "What's our extraction plan?" Dalton smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We'll figure that out after we complete the mission. Same way we always have." They split up 10 minutes later, Webb and Stone helping Hudson toward safety, while Dalton's smaller team melted back into the darkness, heading toward the compound and the confrontation that had been 3 years in the making. Kira checked her Sig Sauer, checked her remaining magazines, checked the knife strapped to her leg. The shoulder wound hurt, but pain was just information. It told her she was alive. Everything else was details. Somewhere ahead, Wyatt Thorne was waiting. The man who'd betrayed everything her father stood for. The man who'd sold American lives for money. The man who'd looked William Blackwell in the eye while planning his death. The man who'd just added Maddox to his body count. The debt was about to come due, and Kira Blackwell intended to collect every penny with interest. The compound sat quiet now, its earlier chaos replaced by the tense silence of predators waiting. Kira lay prone in the frozen mud 30 meters from the perimeter fence, her breath coming in controlled intervals that wouldn't fog in the cold air. Beside her, Dalton studied the layout through night vision optics while Callahan covered their flank from a position 10 meters to the right. 20 minutes had passed since they'd left Hudson with the extraction team. 20 minutes of careful movement through terrain that wanted to kill them as much as any enemy. But they were here now, back where the ambush had happened, and the compound looked different, calmer. The spotlights were dimmed, the frantic movement of contractors replaced by disciplined patrols. Professional, organized, waiting. "I count 8 tangos visible." Dalton whispered, his voice barely audible even at close range. "Doonde. Probably double that inside. Thorne knows we're coming back. He's counting on it." "Then let's not disappoint him," Kira said. Her shoulder throbbed where the bullet had punched through, but she'd stuffed the wound with gauze and wrapped it tight. The bleeding had stopped. That was enough. Callahan low-crawled up beside them. "I've got a way in. Northeast corner, there's a drainage culvert that runs under the fence. Looks like it feeds into the basement of the main building. Tight squeeze, but we can make it. How tight? Dalton asked. You're going to become very familiar with concrete for about 20 meters. Dalton considered this, running tactical calculations that had kept him alive for 4 decades. A drainage culvert meant confined space, no room to maneuver a fatal funnel if someone was waiting on the other end. It also meant getting inside without triggering external sensors, without alerting the patrols, without giving Thorne time to prepare. We go in together, he decided. Blackwell first, she's smallest. I'll follow, then Callahan. We clear the basement level, establish a foothold, then work our way up to find Thorne and the device. Rules of engagement are weapons free. Anyone who's not us is a target. This is not a capture mission anymore. This is for Maddox. They moved to the culvert entrance, a rusted grate half buried in snow and dead vegetation. Callahan produced a multi-tool and went to work on the corroded bolts while the others provided security. The metal fought him, decades of rust and winter refusing to yield. But finally the grate came free with a grinding squeal that seemed loud enough to wake the dead. Everyone froze. 30 seconds passed. A minute. No alarm, no shouts, no indication they'd been heard. The wind had been kind, carrying the sound away from the compound. I'll go first, Kira said. Before anyone could argue, she slipped into the culvert. The space was exactly as tight as Callahan had warned. Maybe 2 feet in diameter, the walls slick with ice and something organic that she tried not to think about. She pulled herself forward, using elbows and knees, her weapon dragging behind her, the darkness absolute. 20 meters had never felt so long. Every few feet she'd pause, listening for sounds ahead, for any indication that this tunnel led to a room full of hostiles waiting to turn her into Swiss cheese. But there was only synths, and the distant drip of water and her own breathing echoing off concrete. Then her hand found empty space. She'd reached the end. Kira eased forward until her head emerged into a larger chamber, some kind of mechanical room lit by a single emergency bulb that cast everything in sickly yellow. Old furnaces sat like sleeping giants, their pipes reaching up into darkness. No movement, no sound except the hum of electrical systems. She pulled herself out of the culvert, cleared the immediate area with her Sig Sauer, then keyed her throat mic twice, the signal for all clear. 3 minutes later, all 3 of them stood in the basement, weapons ready, breath steaming in the cold air. The space was larger than it had first appeared, a warren of rooms and corridors that spoke to Soviet-era construction when everything was built to survive a nuclear war. Concrete walls 2 feet thick, steel doors with locks that looked like they could stop a tank. Multiple levels and redundant systems. The perfect place to hide something valuable, or to trap someone who came looking. Dalton checked his GPS, orienting himself to the building's layout. Main stairs should be 30 meters north, but there's bound to be sensors, cameras, maybe motion detectors. We need to move like ghosts. Or we need to make them come to us, Kira said. She was staring at a circuit breaker panel on the wall, the kind that controlled power distribution for the entire structure. They're waiting upstairs because they think we'll come up the conventional way. What if we don't? What are you thinking? Callahan asked. I'm thinking we kill the power, kill their night vision advantage, and use the chaos to maneuver. She moved to the panel, studying the labels in faded Cyrillic. We can black out everything except emergency lighting. They'll have to come down here to investigate, and when they do, we'll be waiting. Dalton smiled, the expression wolfish in the dim light. Your father would do the same thing. He loved turning the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Then let's hope I learned the lesson well. They set up quickly, professional and efficient. Callahan took position, covering the main stairwell, using the furnaces as cover and concealment. Dalton positioned himself at a side corridor that offered enfilade fire across the open space. Kira stayed at the breaker panel, weapon ready, her good hand on the main power cutoff. On my mark, Dalton whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. Kira threw the breaker. The lights died instantly, plunging the compound into darkness, broken only by scattered emergency bulbs. Somewhere above, she heard shouts of confusion, orders being barked in multiple languages. Footsteps pounded on stairs as contractors rushed to investigate. The first three came down fast and careless, their weapon lights sweeping the darkness. They made it 4 steps into the basement before Callahan opened fire. The suppressed weapon coughed quietly, subsonic rounds punching through flesh and bone. All 3 went down in a heap at the base of the stairs. Silence returned. Kira could hear her heartbeat, could hear the breath of her teammates, could hear someone upstairs screaming orders to be more careful, to use proper tactics. The next group came slower, 5 of them moving in a tactical wedge, weapons and lights coordinated. They were professionals, probably former military, definitely trained. They reached the basement floor and began clearing corners, working the space methodically. But they were fighting in someone else's house now, and Kira knew every shadow. She moved like smoke, circling behind them while they focused on the obvious positions. Her father had taught her this, the art of being where the enemy wasn't looking, of seeing without being seen. She came up behind the last contractor in the wedge and put 2 rounds through the base of his skull before he knew she was there. The others spun at the sound, and that's when Dalton opened fire from his position. Caught between 2 directions, the contractors went down hard and fast. One managed to trigger a burst from his rifle before dying, the muzzle flash blinding in the darkness, rounds sparking off concrete and steel, then quiet again. 8 dead in less than 2 minutes. "They're going to try something different now," Dalton said. "Grenades maybe, or they'll just seal us in and wait for us to suffocate." "Then we go up," Kira said. "Before they can organize. Hit them while they're still reeling." They moved to the stairs, stepping over bodies, ascending into darkness that felt thick enough to touch. The emergency lighting cast weird shadows that turned familiar shapes into monsters. Every corner could hide death. Every doorway could be a fatal funnel. The first floor was a maze of corridors and rooms, most empty. Some filled with equipment that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. They cleared each space with practiced efficiency, a 3-person ballet of violence and precision. 2 more contractors died, caught alone and unprepared. A 3rd tried to run and caught Callahan's rounds in the spine. Then they reached the central chamber and everything changed. The room was huge, a former assembly area or warehouse, its ceiling 30 feet high and crisscrossed with catwalks and support beams. In the center, sitting on a reinforced table, was a metal briefcase. Not large, maybe 2 feet by 18 inches, but unmistakable in its purpose. The nuclear device. Real, present, deadly. And standing beside it, flanked by 4 contractors with automatic weapons, was Wyatt Thorne. He looked older than Kira remembered, harder. His face had the weathered quality of someone who'd spent too much time in bad places doing worse things. But his eyes were the same cold and calculating, the eyes of a man who'd learned to live without conscience. "Kira," his voice echoed across the empty space. "I was wondering if you'd make it this far. Your father would be proud." She stepped into the open, her Sig Sauer trained on his center mass. Dalton and Callahan spread out behind her, creating a firing line that covered all 4 contractors. "Why?" The word came out flat, emotionless. She'd practiced this moment in her mind 1,000 times, had imagined screaming at him, cursing him, making him feel the rage that had burned in her for 3 years. But now that the moment was here, she felt only cold certainty. "Why did you kill my father?" Thorne smiled, and there was genuine sadness in it. "I didn't want to. You have to believe that. William was like a father to me. He taught me everything, believed in me when others didn't. But he discovered something he shouldn't have, something I couldn't let him report." "Syria," Dalton said, his voice hard. 2019. Civilian casualties. You covered it up. 6 people died because of bad intelligence I provided," Thorne said. 6 innocents. I panicked, blamed it on faulty coordinates. Your father investigated, found the truth. He gave me a choice: confess or he'd report me himself. "So you chose murder instead," Kira said. "I chose survival. I'd already been contacted by people who were very interested in American intelligence. Russians mostly, some Chinese. They paid well and they offered protection. All they wanted was information." Thorne's hand moved closer to the briefcase. Your father's team in Afghanistan wasn't the first I sold out, won't be the last. This is war, Kira. The real kind where money and power matter more than flags and anthems. My father died believing in something bigger than himself, Kira said. You died the moment you put a price tag on that belief. You just haven't stopped breathing yet. Thorne's smile faded. Big words from a little girl playing soldier. You think you're like him, you think you can match what William Blackwell was, you're nothing. A diversity hire with a famous father's name. That's all you'll ever be. Kira felt the words hit. Felt the old doubts and insecurities that she'd carried through buds, through DevGru selection, through every mission where she'd had to prove herself again and again. For just a second she wavered. Then she remembered her father's voice teaching her to shoot when she was 8 years old, his hand steady on her shoulder. You know what separates a good shot from a great one, little warrior. It's not strength or speed. It's knowing who you are when everything else falls away. She knew who she was, daughter of William Blackwell, Navy SEAL, the woman who would end Wyatt Thorne's treachery here and now. Lower your weapon, one of the contractors said, his rifle tracking toward her. Last warning. Instead, Kira did something none of them expected. She lowered her Sig Sauer completely, let it hang loose at her side. You want me to be like my father, she said quietly. Then I'll do what he would do. Thorne's eyes narrowed, suspicious. And what's that? Give you a choice, the same choice you never gave him. She met his gaze across the room, her voice steady. Walk away, leave the device, disappear. I won't chase you, I won't hunt you, just go. The room went absolutely silent. Even the contractors looked confused, their weapons wavering slightly. You're serious, Thorne said. My father believed in mercy, believed in redemption. Even for people who didn't deserve it. Kira's hand stayed away from her weapon. I don't know if I have that kind of strength, but I'm willing to try. For him, for Maddox, for everyone you've killed. For a long moment, Thorne seemed to consider it. Something flickered across his face, emotion breaking through the cold calculation. Regret, maybe, or the memory of who he'd been before money and fear turned him into this. Then his hand moved toward the briefcase and Kira saw the detonator attached to its side. I believe you, Thorne said. I believe you'd let me walk. That's why I can't. His fingers found the trigger. If I can't have my freedom, no one gets to win. He pressed the button. This time the detonator was real. A metallic beep echoed through the chamber, followed by a digital display on the briefcase flickering to life. Red numbers began counting down: 020, 0159, 0158. 2 minutes. Thorne, what did you do? Dalton's voice was sharp. C4 charges throughout the building, Thorne said, backing toward the door. Enough to bring this whole place down. And that device? He gestured to the briefcase. It's armed. You try to move it, it detonates early. 2 minutes to disarm or everyone within 3 blocks becomes a radiation statistic. His contractors provided covering fire as Thorne ran for the exit. Time dilated. Kira saw Thorne disappearing through the doorway, saw the timer 0147, 0146, saw Dalton moving toward the briefcase, his face grim. Every instinct screamed at her to chase Thorne, to finish what her father had started, to end the man who'd betrayed everything, to avenge Maddox. But the device was ticking, and Dalton was just one man against a bomb that needed 2. Her father's voice echoed, "Duty first, revenge never." "Dalton!" she shouted. "I'm with you!" She holstered her weapon and ran to the briefcase, ignoring Thorne's escaping footsteps. Callahan pursued the traitor while Kira focused on the bomb. 22, 121, 120. I need light, Dalton ordered, already working on the case's access panel. Kira aimed her weapon light at the mechanism. Inside a nightmare of wires and circuits, Dalton's hands moved with the steady precision of someone who'd done this in Desert Storm, in Panama, in a dozen hellholes where one wrong move meant death. 4 wires, he muttered. Red, blue, yellow, black. Classic setup, but which order? 0058, 0057, 0056. Your call, Garrett, Kira said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Blue first, then yellow. His fingers gripped the wire cutters. If I'm wrong, you're not wrong. 0043, 0042. He cut the blue wire. The timer kept counting. 0038, 0037. Yellow wire. Snip. The timer stuttered, flickered, then resumed. 0031, 0030. Damn it. Dalton's face was slick with sweat. There's a failsafe. Red or black. One disarms, one detonates immediately. 022. 021. Kira stared at the wires, her mind racing through every training scenario, every technical brief. Then she saw it, a tiny scratch on the black wire's insulation, barely visible. Someone had worked on this wire recently. A tell. Black wire, she said with absolute certainty. You sure and cut it. 0012, 0011. Dalton cut the black wire. The timer stopped at 0007. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Then the display went dark and the mechanism gave a soft click of disengagement. Kira's legs nearly gave out. We need to secure this and get out. The building charges. Already disarmed, Callahan reported over radio. Found the detonator on Thorne's body. I got him 50 meters from the building. He's down wounded but alive. Kira closed her eyes. Thorne was caught. The device was safe. Her father could rest. Maddox was avenged. She'd chosen duty over revenge, and somehow she'd gotten both. They secured the nuclear device, carefully separating it from its case and placing it in a lead-lined container that Callahan found in an adjacent room. The thing was surprisingly small, maybe 15 pounds of precisely machined plutonium and conventional explosives. Such a small object to cause so much death. Callahan was on the radio calling for extraction, coordinating with friendly forces that were finally close enough to respond. Webb reported that Hudson was stable already in a medevac helicopter heading to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. The rest of their team was bruised, bleeding, exhausted, but alive, except for Maddox. Maddox was gone. As they waited for extraction, Kira stood apart from the others, looking at Thorne where he lay zip-tied and barely conscious, guarded by Callahan. The man who'd killed her father. The traitor who'd sold American lives for money. The man who'd sent Maddox to his death. He looked small now, pathetic, all his power and menace stripped away. Dalton approached quietly, standing beside her. You did good tonight. Your father would be proud. I almost killed him. Almost threw away everything to get revenge. But you didn't. That's what counts. Dalton put a hand on her good shoulder. William told me once that the hardest battles aren't the ones where you pull the trigger. They're the ones where you choose not to. Where you do the right thing even when every part of you wants to do the wrong thing. That's real strength. That's real honor. Kira was quiet for a long moment. Do you think it was worth it? All of this, the pain, the sacrifice. Maddox, do you think justice actually means anything? I think it has to. Otherwise, what are we fighting for? What did Maddox die for? The extraction helicopters arrived 30 minutes later. Blackhawks that settled in the snow like great mechanical birds. Combat medics swarmed over the team, treating wounds, checking vitals, preparing them for transport. Thorne was loaded separately, bound and hooded, surrounded by armed guards who looked ready to shoot him if he so much as sneezed wrong. Kira was the last aboard, taking one final look at the compound where so much had happened. The building sat dark and silent now, its secrets exposed, its purpose served. In a few hours, other teams would arrive to process the scene, to gather evidence, to document everything for the trials that would follow. But for her, it was over. The mission complete, the truth found, the price paid. She climbed into the helicopter and let the medics work on her shoulder while the aircraft lifted into the night sky. Through the open door, she watched Poland fall away beneath them, a patchwork of snow and darkness and distant lights. Somewhere down there, her father had died fighting for what he believed in. Somewhere down there, Maddox had made the same sacrifice, and tonight she'd honored both of them by being better than her rage, stronger than her grief. 3 weeks later, Kira stood in a hospital room at Ramstein Air Base watching Hudson sleep. The surgery had gone well, the doctors said, full recovery expected in 6 months. He'd been awake earlier, long enough to squeeze her hand and tell her she'd done good, that William would have been proud. Now he slept, his breathing steady, his color improving. Beside his bed, a table held cards and flowers and small tokens from the team. They'd all visited, all made sure the old SEAL knew he wasn't alone. "He's tougher than he looks." Kira turned to find Dalton in the doorway, his arm in a sling from where a round had clipped him during the extraction. He'd refused to stay in the hospital, discharging himself after 12 hours despite doctors' protests. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Sore, tired, still processing." "That's normal. What we went through, what you went through. It takes time to work through it." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Hudson breathe, listening to the hospital sounds filtering in from the corridor. "I got word from the JAG office," Dalton said finally. "Thorne is officially charged with treason, conspiracy, murder, and about 40 other counts. They've identified at least 8 operations he compromised, maybe more. 23 American service members died because of intelligence he sold. Will he hang? Probably. If not, life in Leavenworth without possibility of parole." Dalton shifted his weight. "Either way, he'll never hurt anyone again. Your father can rest easy, so can Maddox. My father's dead. Maddox is dead. Nothing will bring them back." "No, but you made sure their deaths weren't in vain. You exposed the rot, cut out the cancer. That matters, Kira. That means something." She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel like justice had been served, like the scales were somehow balanced. But all she felt was tired, empty. The rage that had driven her for 3 years was gone, burned away in that compound, and nothing had rushed in to fill the void it left. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal, take some leave, decompress, figure out what you want next." Dalton met her eyes. "Admiral Thompson called me yesterday. He's offering you a position as an instructor at Buds, teaching the next generation, passing on what your father taught you. It's good work, important work, and it's yours if you want it." Kira thought about that, thought about standing on the beach at Coronado watching young candidates struggle through surf torture, pushing themselves beyond what they thought possible. Thought about being the voice that encouraged them, the standard that measured them, the mentor who shaped them into warriors. Her father had done that, had molded Wyatt Thorne and hundreds of others, teaching them not just to fight, but why to fight. Most had learned the lesson. Some, like Thorne, had lost their way, but that didn't invalidate the mission, didn't make the teaching less important. "I'll think about it," she said. 6 months later, Kira stood on the beach at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado watching the sunrise over the Pacific. Behind her, Hell Week was in full swing, candidates struggling through their 5th day without sleep. Their bodies pushed past any reasonable limit. She could hear them in the surf, could hear the instructors shouting encouragement and criticism in equal measure. She'd accepted the position, had spent the last month learning to be an instructor, to channel her experience into lessons that might save lives. It was harder than combat in many ways, required patience she didn't always have. Demanded she watch people fail without immediately helping them. But it was important, worth doing. Hudson had visited last week, walking with a cane, but walking. He'd watched her teach, had nodded approval at her methods, had told her that William would have loved seeing her like this. Passing on the legacy, keeping the tradition alive. Dalton had retired finally after 41 years of service. He'd come to Coronado for the ceremony, had received his medals and commendations with the same quiet dignity he'd shown in combat. During his speech, he'd mentioned William Blackwell, and Cole Maddox had told the assembled crowd about SEALs who'd saved his life and taught him what honor really meant. Thorne's trial had been swift and brutal. The evidence was overwhelming, his guilt undeniable. The military tribunal sentenced him to death, a sentence he'd appealed, but that would almost certainly stand. He'd be executed within a year, his name removed from all honors, his existence erased from the proud history of the SEALs. Sometimes late at night, Kira wondered if she'd made the right choice. If she should have let anger win, should have squeezed Thorne's throat until his heart stopped. It would have been easier, cleaner. No trials, no appeals, no years of waiting for bureaucracy to deliver justice. But then she'd remember her father's words, his lessons about honor and mercy and choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, and she knew deep in her bones that she'd done exactly what William Blackwell would have wanted. The real victory wasn't killing Thorne. It was being better than him. A young candidate emerged from the surf, stumbling with exhaustion, her face pale with cold and fatigue. She was small, maybe 5'3", probably weighed 120 pounds, soaking wet. The other instructors were watching her closely, waiting for her to quit, to ring the bell that would end her suffering. Kira walked over, stood in front of the candidate until the woman looked up. "You thinking about quitting?" Kira asked. "No, ma'am." The voice was hoarse but determined. "Good, because you know what separates a SEAL from everyone else. Ma'am, it's not strength, it's not speed. It's the refusal to quit when everything in you wants to. It's choosing the hard path because it's right, not because it's easy." Kira helped the candidate to her feet. "My father taught me that. Now I'm teaching you. Don't waste the lesson." The candidate nodded, her eyes clearing, finding new reserves of strength. She turned back toward the surf, back toward the pain and the cold and the impossible challenges ahead. Kira watched her go, and for the first time in 3 years felt something like peace settle over her. That evening, she drove to a small cemetery outside San Diego where her father was buried. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates and rank. Master Chief William Blackwell, 1968-2021. 33 years of service. A lifetime of sacrifice. She knelt beside the grave, placing a new trident insignia on the stone, her own, the one she'd earned through blood and pain and the lessons he'd taught her. "Mission complete, Dad," she said quietly. "Thorne's in custody, the truth is out, justice is being served." She paused, her throat tight. "I didn't kill him. I wanted to, God knows I wanted to, but I remembered what you taught me, about honor. About being better than our enemies, about choosing mercy when we don't have to." Her voice caught. "It cost us, though. Maddox didn't make it out. He died covering our extraction, bought us the 30 seconds we needed to get clear. He was a good man. Died doing his job like you did." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Hudson's walking now, but he'll never deploy again. Ended his career saving mine. Dalton retired with nightmares he won't talk about. And me." She touched her shoulder where the scar tissue was still tender. "I'm okay, but I see Thorne's face every time I close my eyes. See the moment I chose not to kill him. Wonder if mercy was weakness." The wind picked up, rustling through the nearby trees, carrying the scent of the ocean. "But you'd say it wasn't, wouldn't you? You'd say mercy is the hardest choice, that anyone can kill. It takes real strength to let someone live when they deserve to die." She stood, touched the cold stone one last time. "I'm teaching at Buds now, passing on what you gave me. There's a kid in my class reminds me of myself at that age. Small, determined, won't quit no matter what. I'm going to make sure she makes it through. Going to teach her what you taught me." She paused, looking at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "I miss you, Dad, every day. But I'm okay. I'm doing the work, honoring the legacy, being the SEAL you raised me to be." As she walked back to her car, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. Beautiful, peaceful, the kind of evening that made you remember why some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. Kira Blackwell had found her truth, had delivered her justice, and now finally she could begin to heal. The trident on her arm caught the last light of day, the eagle and anchor and pistol gleaming, a symbol of everything she'd overcome, everything she'd become, everything she would pass on to the next generation. Her father's legacy lived on, In her, in the candidates she trained, in the battles yet to be fought and the warriors yet to be forged, Maddox's sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Hudson's career ending in service. Dalton's decades of dedication, all of it meant something. All of it mattered. The work was never done. But for tonight it was enough. She drove back to Coronado as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, each one a point of light in the vast darkness, each one a reminder that even in the longest night there was always hope, always honor, always the promise of dawn.